Hello, this is Jeffrey Milburn, and this is the Omni Art Salon number 283. In this groundbreaking two-part conversation with researcher, scientist, and inventor David Sereda, you will hear in detail the latest findings concerning the geometry and what he has discovered as the actual purpose of the Great Pyramid in Egypt on the Giza Plateau. David will also discuss how extraterrestrial intelligence is communicating daily and how to enhance your experience to engage with this emergent intergalactic fellowship of species with his proprietary technologies that are designed to substantially enhance consciousness expansion and sensitivity. We also discuss the tremendous and far-reaching wave of universal language communications exhibited in hundreds of progressive geogram crop circles in southern England and around the world. Fascinating and educational stuff. David and I also discuss how the next frontier in quantum field science and research will be to formulate a periodic table of frequency identifiers or frequency and oscillation signatures of all the natural elements as a first step towards intergalactic communications, travel, and ultimately collaboration with advanced off-world species. This fresh approach to progressing the aptitude of humanity to communicate at a much higher level of sophistication is in its infancy at this point. However, thanks to independent quantum field research scientists and inventors like David Sereda, we have some very important clues as to what will be required for the human race to evolve past fossil fuel, flat Earth technology, and truly enter a true space age where intergalactic travel is reality, not confined to militaristic, violence-laced science fiction Hollywood hype. For those who are focused on new science and the cutting edge of consciousness and science-based studies, my conversation with David will be of great interest and value, as he has discovered some very meaningful mathematics and geometries in combination with the layered stone materials that are infused into the Great Pyramid on the Giza Plateau. Taken together, these wide-ranging elements induce very specific frequencies and oscillations required for intergalactic communication and travel within a quantum field. For UFO watchers around the world, it will make sense out of the flight characteristics exhibited by these craft in the extensive video footage that has accumulated over many decades. The flight patterns and appearance of these crafts seem to indicate a supra-quantum field technology intrinsic to traveling vast distances through inner space. Our fascinating conversation is as much an exploration of advanced physics, mathematics, and geometry as it is a heart-centered and consciousness-based 10th door investigation, and this is what makes it so interesting and far-reaching. The creation of sustainable quantum field-based energy systems that transcends today's poisonous fossil fuel and nuclear technologies will be intrinsic to elevate humanity beyond the current misanthropic oil bank debt system and usher in an age of human cooperation with nature, true science, and peaceful humanitarian social and economic systems. A true breath of fresh air, David Sereda offers a very different look at what is possible for human technological, social, and economic development. Mainstream philanthropists who are truly interested in furthering humanity's evolution and survival need to pay special attention to the profoundly important research that David Sereda and a handful of other researchers of this ilk are doing to further human understanding of the larger picture of the cosmos and its diverse inhabitants. Clinging to past accomplishments and tinkering with established science is not enough to penetrate what is hidden in plain sight. If mainstream science were truthful, with a modicum of humility, they would admit that humanity is in a baby's crawl mode compared to our extraterrestrial visitors. In any subject field, egotism leads to conflict and destruction. Only open inquiry leads to discovery and knowledge expansion, and it must deal with the little understood. That is where true investigation really matters. And it is in this arena that the true scientist is focused, and David Sereda is focused in this arena. Choose discovery and exploration. Traditional Egyptology is mired in quite narrow assumptions about what is probable and possible when investigating historical narrative. Conveniently ignoring remarkable and ubiquitous evidence that paints a completely different picture, mainstream Egyptologists wander around the no-man's land of agreed-upon misinformation that the pyramids were built by thousands of slaves to be used as tombs for pharaohs of Egypt's past. Such insufficient explanations for buildings whose extraordinary construction far exceed this kind of small fictional history reminds me of the deep fear during the Middle Ages that millions held of falling off the edge of the earth if one attempted to cross the Atlantic Ocean. It's all in the perspective, and small perspectives are by nature self-limiting and produce all manner of error in conclusions reached based upon poorly selected and assembled evidence. Throughout history it has been the mavericks who create true breakthroughs. Einstein, Tesla, Galileo, Columbus, and many others stood for truth against the prevailing politics of ignorance and power in their day. Today, it is no different. It's just the actors who have changed. For millennia, human civilization has felt quite isolated on our small planet. Indeed, most are still wondering if there's any life in the universe beyond human existence. The truth is, for those who are thoughtfully paying attention, that question has already been answered. It's just that the ways that the answers have been given are so unorthodox and unusual compared to puny human projections of what is possible that they are persistently ignored and discredited by mainstream ignoramuses. Free thinking is a prerequisite for true understanding and a larger view of reality, and is a quality that seems in short supply today when perusing what poses as news. I'm sure you will find this in-depth conversation with David Sereda very inspirational and compelling, and will add significantly to your expanded perspective of human history, UFO phenomenon, and science. David's website, livestreamtechnologies.com, offers many of his great consciousness-enhancing products and more information about his highly original and innovative research. David also has many videos available on YouTube. I highly recommend that you take a look at his wide offerings, for David Sereda is one of the most authentic, interesting, and well-informed researchers of our time, and should not be missed by those seriously interested in expanding their understanding of the cosmos. And so now, without further ado, the Omni Art Salon proudly presents Uncovering Advanced Pyramid Technology with David Sereda. David, thanks so much for joining me today on Omni Art Salon.
It's great to be with you, Jeffrey. It's been a long time since I saw you in Santa Fe years ago.
Yes, and now you're in Canada, which is one of my favorite places in the world where you live, and right across the border, like you were talking earlier.
Yeah, we're in Nelson, British Columbia, which is kind of like a Santa Fe, Sedona of the North. There's a large spiritual awareness community here. There's 5 health food stores and 10 yoga studios, and there's ashrams everywhere. There's all kinds of different, healing and meditative ashrams in the mountains here.
Terrific.
And there's a ski resort, so we're sitting around all this snow right now.
Well, I have a lot of questions today because we haven't talked for a long time, and I was fascinated watching some of your feed material. And of course, I listened to some of the things you put out over the years, so I'm aware of what you've been doing. And I think that you really hit the core with me, because I find the pyramids in Egypt like the big obvious thing. It's like hidden in plain sight for all to see. And yet it's ignored by the mainstream a lot, other than the typical story. So why don't you start off just telling us about your latest investigations into the purpose of the Great Pyramids in Egypt, what you've discovered?
Well, there have been some new discoveries by Chris Dunn that the Egypt pyramids were actual power plants. Mm-hmm. And the reason he deducted that is because of the The materials the pyramid is made out of are multi-layered. You have red granite in the core of the pyramid, the very core where all the chambers, king and queen's chambers, and the grand gallery is. And then surrounding that you have limestone. And then on the outer casings, which have all been stripped away by the Muslims, you had a pure white stone, lime white stone blocks on the outside. So there were three different types of materials. And he thought it was to produce power. And I said, no, this isn't to produce electricity. That's the way you make a crystal oscillator or a transistor. What a crystal oscillator is a piece of quartz crystal with two metal or conductive plates on either side of the crystal. And when you run electricity through that little joint, it causes the electrons in the crystal. Electrons are the lightest, one of the lightest subatomic particles in the entire atom. In fact, there's only one thing lighter, and that would be a neutrino. And they are the E in electricity, just so you know. So electrons flow through wiring and light your light bulbs and run your computers. The thing that's unique about crystal, it was actually discovered in 1947. John Bardeen, Will Braden, and one other physicist William Braden, John Bardeen, and Will Shockley discovered the transistor, and they were working on it in the late 30s, early 40s, and by 1947 they had proven the transistor effect, and actually later won the Nobel Prize, which is the same year, of course, as the Roswell incident. So a lot of people think that the transistor came out of the Roswell incident and the crystal oscillator. So what we do is we take crude electricity and we get electrons in crystal. You have these unbound free electrons just floating there. And William Shockley goes, oh my God, you can use a crystal as an amplifier to amplify radio signals, whereas right now, you see, Tesla invents radio in the Chicago World's Fair in 1893, and his radios were very weak. I mean, he demonstrated it. It worked. His lab assistant, Marconi, steals the patent out of his drawer and broadcasts the first, radio message across the Atlantic, so he gets all the credit for that. Later, tube amplifiers were used, gas tube amplifiers, to amplify weak radio signals so you could hear the transmission better, but it still wasn't very good. You couldn't, if the president was speaking, the radio would be all scratchy if you lived more than 100 miles away. So you had to have all these repeater stations, and radio was really scratchy. So William Shockley goes, if there's all these electrons on a piece of quartz crystal, we can use that as an amplifier and amplify radio signals, what later became known as solid-state radios. Remember,
now, are these electrons inert? Are they just existent? Are they in movement?
Well, no. They're electrons basically are always moving. They move very slowly to very fast, depending on the charge applied. It's so easy to get electrons to move in quartz that they essentially first discovered the crystal oscillator, which is responsible for generating tuned frequencies in your cell phone and your radio. So when you want to tune to a particular station on the FM or the AM band, you're using crystal oscillators to generate a frequency in the receiver and the sender. And whenever you have two frequencies that are identical at any distance, you have communication between those 2 points. Because any two locations at the same frequency open up a line of communication. Now, albeit that signal is extremely weak, which is why I use another piece of quartz crystal in a multi-layered mineral and gold. Actually, use thin layers of gold. And this little thing is called a transistor because, once again, you want to amplify that tuned frequency so that you can hear it, right, at great distances.
Right.
And when William Shockley first proved that you could use these electrons on quartz crystal to amplify radio signals, it was a pretty crude-looking device, but what interested me about it is he couldn't get it to work according to the math and the physics if you ran a wire or a conductor plate just a hair's breadth above the crystal, you should be able to grab all these little electrons on the crystal, like passengers jumping onto a train, and then voila, you have amplification because you have more electrons, you got more electricity. Well, it didn't work. But what interested me is the first transistor, he slammed the electrons in a pyramidion angle, gold conductor plate, kind of bouncing in at this angle, and it worked.
Oh, that's fascinating. Wow.
And I saw that angle and I went, oh my God, that looks like the angle of the pyramid. So I said, there's got to be something to this. The pyramids had to be something more than just a power plant at best to produce electricity. I mean, why would you amass that huge amount of stone in 3 different layers? I said, oh my God, there's layers. That means this thing, see, you make transistors in layers because you have to set up difference. The voltage means difference. And for example, in a Duracell battery, you have a copper and a zinc probe in the battery. So your positive and negative on your battery there has to be difference, and you create difference, which is voltage, through different materials, right? Copper and zinc. So that when I saw that the pyramid had these 3 different layers of materials, I went, this thing is either a transistor or a crystal oscillator. And if it's a crystal oscillator, it's cut at a specific shape and angle and dimensions to generate a specific set of frequencies. So what I did, this is my discovery, is I'm the first one to do the math on the Great Pyramid as a crystal oscillator generating electromagnetic, which means at the speed of light, oscillation. And so I took the base of the pyramid, and the base of the pyramid has 4 slightly uneven lengths on each side, which are proven not to be in error by Peter Le Mesurier, who wrote The Great Pyramid Decoded in the 70s, which is the first mystical book I ever read in my life. So I did the math as a square electronic wave. When you excite electrons in granite or limestone, because it's a semiconductor, it's very similar to quartz, using a charge, an electrical charge, the electrons will oscillate in that square pattern less than the speed of light. But just at the surface of the crystal, of the stone, you generate an electromagnetic signal, which means it's oscillating in a square wave pattern at the speed of light. So I did the math, and I went, oh my God, look at these frequencies, look at these numbers. There's no way the builder did not intend this to be a crystal oscillator, because these numbers are so perfect. They're so flawless. At the base of the pyramid, I was getting, on the north side, 4140 kilohertz, 4140 kilohertz, and then the south side was 4141, and the east side was 4142, and the other side, the west side was 4143. So they were consecutive differential numbers in a perfect firing sequence of north-south, east-west. And I went, that's impossible that the numbers would show a perfect firing sequence of north, south, east, west. So when I jumped all the way to the capstone, and this is where it gets exciting, because I'm not going to tell you what those numbers are yet. And I took the square wave length of the 570-something Egyptian inches, which is almost identical to our inch. There's so little difference you can barely see it. You take the speed of light, and you divide it by the wavelength, which is the distance around the base of the top of the pyramid. There's no capstone there, so you have a flat shelf, square wave length. And I did the math, and oh my God, I just jumped out of my skin when I saw the frequency that it was generating. I said, that's impossible. The frequency of the capstone base of the pyramid is 5.151 megahertz, 5151. And I went, that's the slope angle of the pyramid. The slope angle of the pyramid is 51 degrees and 51 minutes when it had its limestone blocks on it. I said, how the heck could the builder have been a Stone Age, builder of a giant tomb? He would have had to know the speed of light to calculate those dimensions to generate the same number as a frequency as the slope angle of the pyramid.
Amazing.
And that is Absolutely indisputable. You can do the math over and over and over again, and I have copies of the math for any... You don't even have to be a good mathematician. You just take the speed of light. Now, we didn't know, Jeffrey, the speed of light, even in Einstein's era, to a degree of perfection that we narrowed it down to in 1972. Using very sophisticated atomic clocks, we narrowed the speed of light down just to a tad under 300,000 kilometers per second. So if it wasn't perfect, I would not get 5.151 megahertz, which means the builder knew it perfectly. And that is the first case in the history of pyramidology that I discovered that mathematically, you cannot argue with math, that as a semiconductive oscillator, the frequency that the pyramid would generate at its surface would be 5.151 megahertz as a square wave. In electronics, you have sine wave, which is a curving wave. You have square wave. You have triangular waves. You have sawtooth waves, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the interesting thing about why square wave is if you take a little signal generator, and a lot of people have those out there, and you get a little LED light, and you run 60 hertz, which is where we use electricity at 60 hertz all over North America and Europe, and you run a sine wave through the light bulb, and then you switch it to square wave, it's way brighter. Uh-huh. A square magnetic field is stronger than a circular sine wave magnetic field.
Interesting.
Which is very interesting. So then what I had to do is say, there's no doubt that the pyramids were giant crystal oscillators. What do these frequencies mean? And the number 5151 I'm going to show you. I have a little video on YouTube. If you go to David Sereda's Spaceman 99 YouTube channel, you can see my quantum pyramid trailer video there, and you'll see this video about the 5151. And this number, I believe, is the number of the fifth dimensional universe. And the reason I believe that is the base of the pyramid's frequencies is 4141 on the north side of the pyramid. Mm-hmm. 4141 kilohertz, 4.141 kilohertz, and when you get to the capstone base, it's 5151 megahertz, 5.151 megahertz. So you have the same harmonic. Now, in Greek gematria, which is for the Greeks, which were deep followers of the ancient Egyptians, the Greeks adopted a lot of mysticism and a lot of math from the Egyptians.
Right.
They studied Egyptology and embedded it in their culture. They assigned a number to every letter in the Greek alphabet, and therefore a combination of numbers for every word in the Greek, dictionary of their language. So the meaning of 5-1 is the heart, which is actually Kithara. Kithara became Sitara, which became guitar. And it is one of the earliest stringed instruments when you go back to Pythagoras, who develops the monochord, which is a single stringed instrument where you slide a block up and down this monochord to change the length of the string to therefore change the note that it would play. So I was thinking to myself, how did the Greeks assign the number 5-1 to the earliest instrument, the kithara, when the Great Pyramid slope angle was known, and even in those times, to be 51 degrees and 51 minutes, because that would have been before the Muslims just ripped all the limestone casing on the outside and changed the angle to 49 degrees.
Right.
You see, so because Pythagoras is before Christ, long before Christ, and Archimedes is long before him, who is really the father of all physics. So that would mean the pyramid, deep inside of it, I've never said this on any radio show, is a lost music scale. And I tested this scale, the whole scale. I took I did all the math from the base of the pyramid to the top, and I found the first metric, which means 10 base, music scale in history.
Wow.
Now, the Bible book of Psalms describes a 10-string lyre, which is like a sitar, and yet there is no evidence of a 10-tone music scale anywhere. And our current model started with 7 tones in music, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and expanded to 12 tones, what is known as the 12-tone chromatic scale today. And the 12-tone chromatic scale today starts at 440 hertz.
Oh, interesting.
That's A. So what I did, this is so astounding, is I took the hidden pyramid scale, which I will release very soon in a new film I'm working on, it's called Inside the Quantum Pyramid, and I play those tones. I wish I could play them for you now, but I'm afraid it won't go well through the phone system from my computer. I have a signal generator program, and if you play the 12 tones of the chromatic scale, like an xylophone,
right,
and if you play them one at a time, they're very beautiful. They just go boo, boo, boo. They just go up, right? But when you play the 12 tones of the chromatic scale, just the first 3, all at the same time, there's a lot of distortion in the space between each note, which means they're not really that harmonic together. And then if you go to the famous solfeggio 9 tones, because he has a 9-tone scale, and you play his first 3 tones, you go, you know, those are nicer together than the chromatic first 3 tones. But then when you play the pyramid tones, which is a lost music scale that I've discovered mathematically, they blow them both away. They're so beautiful, they melt like butter to your ears and your body when you listen. So
I'm just wondering, as I'm thinking about this, oscillator with these 3 layers, and of course my question is, naturally goes to the center of it, the king's chamber. How was that incorporated into this oscillator? What was the purpose of that particular area?
Exactly. Now I'll show you. This is really going to be mind-blowing evidence. I mean, one, I thought to myself, if you create oscillators, crystal oscillators, on a small scale as we do today, and any 2 oscillators over any distance on the planet, including anywhere in the solar system, you instantly have radio communication. Because the way radio communication works is 2 or more tuned circuits to the same frequency are in communication. So if we're all listening to a song on the radio, we're all tuning our crystals in our radio, in our crystal oscillators, to that frequency. And the transistors, there's over 3 billion transistors in an Intel computer chip amplifying all the colors and all the information in your computer right now. So those are transistors. Those are pieces of quartz that are doing that. They're so small you can't even see them. So why make big ones is the question. I mean, Chris Dunn thinks it's to produce electricity, but no, this isn't to produce electricity, because if you go back to Robert Duvall's work and Graham Hancock, they think the pyramids were laid out as a star map. And I say, no, this is not a map. This is crystal oscillators in the ratio of a distant star system.
Sounds like communication devices to me.
You're getting really close. So I built a 9-point oscillator in the ratio of the Pleiades star system, which is 440 light years away, plus, thereabouts. And I recorded a series of questions because when I was a kid growing up in Berkeley in the 60s, in 1968, when I was 7 years old, I saw a flying saucer down low, and everybody was in pandemonium over it because it was so close that everyone could see it. And after 20 minutes, it blinks out and goes into another dimension. And the following 3 weeks, these beings that are from the Pleiades, they didn't name their star Pleiades, they just showed me what the stars looked like and how to find them in the sky, were showing me how their flying saucers work and their technology works. Now, I don't see those beings again for the rest of my life. I'm 52 years old right now. So about 4 years ago, I did this experiment where because I discovered this a long time ago, I decided to create oscillations in the ratio of Pleiades, and I used a very advanced type of transistor interface with it. I didn't use ordinary transistors, which are just quartz. I used living transistors. You'd have to see the movie The Secret Life of Plants to know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
And I recorded a series of questions no, I didn't do the questions yet. I thought, let's send my wife is a jazz singer, Crystal, and she sings the Frank Sinatra song, Fly Me to the Moon. And I decided to send it through the device and see if I get an answer. And I thought it was like, let's see what happens. So I had this whole thing set up on the dining room table with amplifiers, and I've got DNA in there. I've got chlorophyll DNA in there that's alive. And go to sleep. In the middle of the night, I kid you not, I heard an audible, very warm tone male voice saying, "Congratulations, we received your message. Now what do you want to ask us?" And I leap out of bed. I literally leaped. Oh my God, I heard that. I really heard that. It's not like an intuitive voice of your own mind. This was audible.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got up, and it was the day before my birthday, August 21st that year. And I get on the computer and I record all these questions. Where have you been? How come I haven't seen you my whole life? Why don't you get your ships to come closer so we can see you? All these questions. And I record them in Pro Tools with a good microphone, and I send them through the device. As the Pleiades are rising in the east, in Sedona, over the mountains, just before midnight, coming into the 21st. Go to sleep. Nothing happens. The next night, oh my God, I couldn't believe what happened the next night. I mean, it's utterly mind-blowing. They answered every one of my questions. I saw them. They showed me about presidents. They showed me about why they can't get their ships too close to our planet anymore. They answered all my questions. And I made an audio CD about it for people who are interested. Without going into that, because years went by, I did this regularly. Only once a year, I would scientifically, the reason I only did it once a year is I wanted to see my background experience, spiritually and psychically. I didn't want to do this all the time, because then I wouldn't know, could I have these experiences without the technology? And the answer was, for 3 years, I only did it on my birthday, and every single time I had a massive contact experience the next day.
How did that manifest, the contact experience?
It got so strong, Jeffrey, that the second time I did it on my birthday, they literally, I asked them to appear in our house in that series of questions, and I said, you can appear in a way that doesn't compromise, because they told me one of the reasons their flying saucers don't fully materialize very often anymore, like they did in the 60s, and earlier in the 40s and 50s, is because our military has weapons that shoot them down.
I see.
And they said, we have to communicate with you this way. So I'm literally lying there, half asleep, with my little daughter, who's born Alira. Her name is from the lyre, as in the harp, what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I wake up, because I hear somebody typing on a computer, but my wife is in the garage doing laundry, and there's nobody else in the house. And I'm like, what's going on? And I look next to my daughter, and there's a liquid crystal screen floating in the air above her head. I can see this with my eyes open. And there's a movie of a little boy on the screen, and I look to where the projection is coming from. And there's an 8-foot-tall, beautiful, human-looking woman. She's way bigger than us, sitting in the chair, holding this device in her hand that is causing the hologram of a movie of a little boy at the beach in Santa Monica, holding this cup of water, running along, and suddenly a shockwave comes and throws the boy's cup of water into the air. And then I look back, and this being is gone, and the holographic projector is gone. Now, I asked him to appear in our house. Now, literally, it was either the next day or the day before that event. I have the date written down somewhere. There was a person who got on a military base in Arizona, and they shut down the whole base, and this person was holding a device that people thought was some type of an advanced weapon. They didn't know what it was. This was all over the news. And in timing with that, there was a UFO that was filmed by a news camera person from ABC News or one of the major news networks right over Phoenix, Arizona, and it was seen in Colorado, it was seen in New Mexico, and it was seen in California. And the news reporter, remember, I asked them to appear in our skies and in my house in a manner that was safe to them. This news reporter testifies that this thing was not a shooting star because it wasn't moving, it was hovering. It then suddenly accelerates towards the west. That was the official report, and that was the same day of or day before or day after of my event of the Palladian in the house.
Interesting.
Now let's go to the 8-foot tall thing, because you go online and look up Dendera light bulb in Egypt, the Dendera light bulb, and you'll see these two very tall Egyptian god or godlike deities holding this giant tube, which people thought was a light bulb. I do not believe that's a light bulb. And there's these little people underneath it that some people thought were children, but one of them has large breasts, so there's no way in the world those are children. I believe those are the 8-foot tall Palladians, and they're using a wand transmitter, which is an inductor, to induct frequencies into the subjects, humans, to cause an upgrade of their DNA.
Interesting.
Now, based on that drawing, which electrically that is not a light bulb, that's an inductor. There's a coil inside of the giant light bulb, what people think is the Dendera light bulb. And I said, that's the power source. They would have used something like that in the pyramid to induct the electrons in the granite and the limestone to cause it to start oscillating and produce frequencies. Now, why an oscillator that size when you don't need one that size? Because I was able, with a small device, which you can get these if you write David Sereda at hotmail.com. I'll send you information about it. And lightstreamtechnologies.com. You can see it there. My device was inspired by that drawing of the Dendera light bulb. I built an inductor, and I induct the frequencies of different star systems, as well as healing frequencies, as well as the frequencies of the 9 planets in our solar system, which I calculated, into the body to induce mystical experiences. Now, before I go to the final, what I believe the pyramids were used for, is to open up a physical Stargate to move persons, dematerialize persons' bodies and move them faster than light to another location. I did a study NASA has very, very exact data on all the 9 planets in the solar system. And if you know the radius of a planet, the distance from the center of the circle to the skin, you can calculate its frequency very easily. You just take the circumference of the planet. You see, on the Earth's surface, in the gas envelope and in the surface of the crust, you've got excited electrons. And wherever you have excited electrons, just a hair's breadth above that, you generate an electromagnetic signal, which is a speed of light signal spinning around the planet. Tesla measured the frequency of the Earth in Colorado at 7.83 hertz at the surface. Now, there are other frequencies in the atmosphere, but I'm not interested in those. I'm only interested in the one that Tesla measured because it's ground-based frequency. Tesla found the Earth is a massive reservoir of electrons with a negative charge, and most electrons are negative. And just above those excited negative electrons, you have the electromagnetic signal. So it's the same formula. You take the speed of light divided by the distance around the Earth at the equator, and it's 7.45 hertz, not 7.83. And a friend of mine, Elizabeth Rauscher, who's a very good physicist, who works with Nassim Haramein, although, in my opinion, much more brilliant than him, she went to the equator and she said we were getting closer to 7.5 hertz. So why, they didn't understand why, and I said, well, the math says that at the equator at 7.45 something hertz, I have the 10 decimals of accuracy of the number. So I know this is the correct formula. So I did that for all 9 planets in our solar system, and I looked at the frequencies and went, oh my God, the human brain produces 5 major brain waves, from delta, which is deep sleep and deep meditation brain waves, very slow brain waves, to theta, and theta is actually where most humans dream, which is the frequency of Earth.
Ah, interesting.
We dream in the frequency of our own planet.
Which makes sense, actually.
Our planet is now getting distorted by all the satellite signals all over all the major cities. Now, in a movie called, there's a movie called Resonance Beings of Frequency, which is about cell phone towers and how it disturbs human brain waves and how disruptive it is to living systems. There's a Nobel Prize-winning virologist named Luc Montagnier who proves in these experiments, he wins the Nobel Prize for this, that DNA can read 7 hertz frequencies. In fact, it reads frequencies all day long. It was previously thought that the wavelength of DNA is so small that it couldn't register low frequencies, but he proved that it does, which means your DNA is reading frequencies all day long. So then I went, wait a minute, why do all of the 9 planets' frequencies fall perfectly within delta, theta, alpha brainwaves, which is where you're very coherent and learning and waking, to beta brainwaves, to gamma brainwaves. Like if you look at the bandwidth of the frequencies of the 9 planets and you look at the bandwidth of the human brain, you go, none of the frequencies of those planets at their equators falls out of the bandwidth of the brain. And I said, what if the planets are inducting the frequencies of our brains? Like right now we're in Mercury, and Mercury's in retrograde, which is when, Mercury experiences 4 years or 4 trips around the sun for every one of our years.
Right.
So Mercury goes into retrograde 4 times a year. Same difference. Because when it goes with us, between the Earth and the Sun, and Mercury's moving along with us, but it's going faster. Then it whips around the Sun and appears to be going backwards because it's hiding on the other side of the Sun. And its magnetic field is getting distorted by the Sun's field. And then it catches up to us again, and then it's not in retrograde. It'll do that 4 times a year.
Right.
We lose the frequency of Mercury, and the frequency of Mercury is just a tad under 20 hertz. 20 hertz is the most healing frequency to the human body, according to Royal Rife. There's no frequency more beneficial to the body than 20 hertz, and that's the base of the human ear. You hear between 20 and 20,000 hertz. So when Mercury goes retrograde, you lost your 20 hertz inductors, you lost contact with its signal for a while.
I see.
And you go nuts because you need it. You need 20 hertz. So with my device, I can transmit 20 hertz into your body, into your house, for the whole time Mercury's in retrograde. And that's the alpha, the beta part of the brain is 20 hertz, and it's in that range. And you need beta for good communication. So no, these are amazing studies. I'm the first one to do the study on the planet frequencies in the human brain. When you get to Saturn and Jupiter, you're talking about deep delta brainwaves. And deep deltas, children go into deep delta when they're sleeping. And delta is where the body heals, deeply heals. There are good university studies you can Google online about healing delta waves that really, once you have uninterrupted deep sleep in delta, your body can heal itself of almost anything.
Is that what the Rife machine is all about, basically creating frequencies for healing?
Well, my device that I build transmits Rife's frequencies in a way bigger field and a more effective field than the Rife machines you can see out there today.
I see.
I measured the field on all the modern Rife machines, and there's no field there. It's so weak I found a way to build a much bigger field, and I've got people with nerve damage being healed. Somebody just had pancreas cancer, and they did their protein levels test before and after using my device. All their proteins are normal now, which is astounding, and they're cured. I've also used my device to help people get into deeper states of meditation, as well as tuning their biofield to the frequencies of distant star systems, including Sirius, which is very close, to induce mystical experiences with that star system. So what were the pyramids for? Why build oscillators that big when you can do it with a smaller device? And this is where it gets utterly mind-blowing, Jeffrey, because you're looking at the core of how UFOs physically jump from one place to another. Now, when I saw this flying saucer in Berkeley in 1968, note that everyone saw it that day. The streets were covered with people in the local area of Albany that afternoon. Years later at a UFO convention, I was approached by a scientist who works in the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab area up on the hill at the Space Lab up there. So for people who live in the Bay Area, the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab has a perfect view of would have had a perfect view of the flying saucer that day. Mm-hmm. And this man approaches me in the elevator and shows me his badge and says, "I work at the Space Lab." And he said, "We all saw a flying saucer right outside the window in 1972. So mine was 68, right? And the Billy Meyer photographs start his sightings started in 72. He had experiences with them as a child, but his modern experiences when he started photographing them was 1972. And mine was 68, and the other sighting this gentleman testifies was 72. Now, I saw this thing in a blink of an eye. They don't accelerate like a jet. They don't go out into space and take off. They just jump dimensions.
Right.
So what is the 5151 harmonic all about that is in the pyramid? Well, here we go. It gets really, really mind-bending. Firstly, if you take pi, you take the diameter of a circle times pi, you get 3.1 times 3.14, you get the circumference of the circle. Mm-hmm. But if you multiply pi times 0.5151, you get phi, the golden ratio. Now that's a known fact. I did not discover that. What I decided to do next is remeasure the Ark of the Covenant, because I believed that it was originally an Egyptian artifact that Moses took, because Moses was actually Egyptian himself. That's what history really tells us. He was raised by Egyptians, and he was a Hebrew. But he's more Egyptian because he was raised by Egyptians, and he would have studied the ancient gods of Egypt and goddesses were illegal to worship in the 18th dynasty by the pharaoh at that period in history. So they didn't even allow the worship of the older gods and goddesses. Mm-hmm. They wanted the new Egypt to be worshiping the pharaoh. And Moses would not have been interested in that. So you take the Ark of the Covenant. Now in Peter Lemaizure's book, The Great Pyramid Decoded, there are a lot of different measurements for a royal cubit. And God said to make the Ark of the Covenant 2.5 cubits long. And I noticed in Lemaizure's book, nobody had done this before, that the most common measurement in the Great Pyramid is 2 royal cubits. In fact, all the passageways are 2 royal cubits. 2 royal cubits, which is 41.21 Egyptian inches long. I mean, there's no difference between their inch and our inch on measurements. So you take 41.21 Egyptian inches is 2 cubits, and you divide that by 2 to get a true cubit, which is 20.605 inches. Not exactly the cubit we use today, and that's why you won't get this number. So God says make the Ark of the Covenant 2.5 cubits long, so multiply 20.605 by 2.5 cubits, and it's 5151. The Ark of the Covenant has the same number as the slope angle of the pyramid and the frequency it generates at the capstone base.
Was it taken out of that pyramid, do you think?
I think it was the power source to cause the oscillations to occur. And the reason the Egyptian armies were pursuing him is not to recover Hebrew slaves. They didn't care about them because they could go get more slaves. They wanted the Ark.
Yeah.
Because he took it. It was now Google. You can see this when they excavated Tutankhamun's tomb. They found an Ark. The Ark of Anubis was in the front of the tomb. The Egyptians had arks. There's absolute evidence that they had arks. And the two, what we believe are two cherubim bowing towards each other in the Ark of the Covenant, were really Isis and her sister Nephthys, and with their wings bowed towards each other on the surface. So I believe the math proves the Ark belonged to the Egyptians because it has their number on it. Now it gets even more amazing. You go to England, go on Google Earth, and go to Stonehenge, and guess where it's sitting? 51 degrees north latitude. Mm-hmm. You see, then in Colin Andrews' website, he describes this incident that occurred before the very first crop circles ever appeared in England. And there was a TV station broadcasting the news that suddenly gets hijacked. And Colin Andrews is an electrician. And he said, you can't hijack a TV station. That you can't even do it today. You can't go with your laptop and put up a little antenna and hijack their signal because you need a signal 10 times stronger than their signal to do it. Mm-hmm. They said nobody could do that in I believe this was 1977. So I looked at the time and I said, oh my God, the exact time the TV station was hijacked was 5:10 p.m., which is 5:1. And I said, where is the location of the TV transmitter in England? 51 degrees north latitude. So you have Stonehenge over here, and you go to the right on the map, and there's the town, and there's the TV transmitter, 5151. There it is. So what you start to see is the 5151 harmonic is an instrument, it's a musical instrument that if you vibrate it and you know how to build a really good transmitter, you open up a 5151 harmonic, as I did in my own house, and oh my God, you won't even believe the stuff that started happening in our house. I mean, I have visited the fifth dimensional Earth so many times. I've had perfect scientific lessons about what's going on there, how we're in the fourth dimensional Earth right now. And according to NASA, in less than 2,000 years, the magnetic field of the Earth is going to collapse to zero within less than 2,000 years, which is less than the amount of time between the last time Christ walked on the Earth, which means we don't really have that much time here left, because without a magnetic field, you have no way to protect the Earth from incoming radiation, which means most organisms won't live here anymore. And what I believe is going to happen is, I don't believe it will take anywhere near 2,000 years for that to happen because of what happens with magnetic fields exponentially. We've already lost 10% of our field. We've already lost 10% of our field. Magnetic north is suddenly moving extremely fast for no apparent reason. There is a flip in the works right now. It's already happening. It's not a future thing. It's already actually happening. There's a major shift going on, and I predict that whenever this magnetic field collapses on this Earth, literally many of us are going to quantum leap to the fifth dimensional Earth. Now, one night I did a transmission in my house, and I addressed Palladian Council, and I said, was the pyramids, were they used to physically move persons or spaceships, not just communication? That night, not the next night, not 10 nights later, I have a dream that Anubis appears to me. Anubis is the son of Isis' sister, but he's symbolized as the dog, as in the dog star Sirius. And he appears to me and he shows me there was a great Earth event that happened so fast. He runs into the pyramid. He's got this beautiful neck collar. He's a very big black dog. He's talking to me perfectly in my language. And he's telling me that we had so little time, and everybody goes in the pyramid, he switches it on. He switches what I believe is the Ark of the Covenant power source on. But a whirlwind opens up above the top of the Great Pyramid, where the symbol of the eye on the American dollar is, and it creates a Stargate wormhole, and all of us jump through the wormhole, and we're suddenly on another planet, somewhere else, safe from this massive, massive event that occurred on the Earth. He said that not all of us escaped, and when the new people found the pyramids, he said they still worked, and we appeared to them, and they worshipped us as gods, but we're not really gods, we're just very advanced.
And that would be the later dynasties in Egypt.
Yeah, now, there's archaeological. If you read Robert Temple's Egyptian Dawn, Robert Temple wrote The Serious Mystery. And in The Serious Mystery, he proves and risked his entire reputation as a world-class astronomer in England. He proves and believes that beings from Sirius came here a long time ago, and they were, Isis literally was the goddess, and Osiris, her husband, and her sister were beings from that star system, and they were mermaids and mermen. He believes that their planet is an aqueous planet, and they would travel in watery. They would need water when they arrived in Egypt, when they visited periodically through this wormhole technology. Well, one thing that really interested me was how could you physically get something to jump? How would you get it to jump? And when you consider that our bodies contain all of the same materials as a crystal oscillator, our bones are semiconductive, calcium is a super electrolyte. In fact, the stone blocks of the pyramids in Central America, the Chichen Itza, are calcium carbonate stones, and they're very good semiconductors. The bone also contains phosphorus, and in the early days they would layer quartz and phosphorus when they were making transistors, and boron. The bones contain silica, which is quartz crystal. So our 7 gland centers in our body contain silica, minerals. They contain all of the materials that you need to have an oscillator. And therefore, you can excite electrons in the body. And the question is, if you can get electrons to spin at really high speed in a vortex in a body, could it quantum leap? Well, I did experiments, and I built a 6-inch quartz crystal pyramid oscillator, and I started pulsing the pyramid frequencies in my house. And, I mean, the stuff that happened in our house got so intense with these beings, Jeffrey, they literally appeared to us to warn us that we needed to move from Sedona. We needed to get out of this house and get out of there. Within a week, a water line burst in the ceiling, causing a huge flood in the house, and they had to bring these giant blow dryers to blow dry the walls, and the house wasn't electrically grounded, and it started 2 fires that nearly burned down the house, and I had to fight the fire and save my lab, and we moved out of there.
Wow.
And then we moved to another house and started transmitting there with this new pyramid transmitter I developed, and one night they tried to show me the proof of the physical jumping. Every night, it's a ritual. We never leave our, at that point my daughter's 2.5 years old. We don't leave her alone and play in the house, because she can bump her head and fall. She climbs on things. You don't leave a 2.5-year-old on their own. And she has a playroom with this antique lamp with an LED light bulb in it. And every night after I meditate, she's asleep in the bed with us. She doesn't have her own room. She sleeps with us. I go and turn the light out in her playroom. My daughter has never ever reached to unscrew a light bulb, especially because they're so hot, but she's never even tried it on her own. So I turn out the light, go to bed, and that night I run the big pyramid oscillator in the house with the pyramid frequencies. Next morning, we go to the playroom to turn on the light, and there's no light bulb in there. It's gone. And you can lose your keys, you can lose your cell phone, but you don't lose the light bulb in a socket. They picked that to jump through the wormhole.
I see.
Because they knew that, if I lost my keys, I lost my keys. Like, I can't say the keys went through a wormhole. But the light bulb is unarguable. You have to unscrew it. I turned it out myself that night. I remember so well, really late night, going and doing it. Well, my brother Michael tells a story. A friend of his built a pyramid house in Tofino, British Columbia, that was the same angle as the Great Pyramid. It was north-facing, magnetic north-facing. And they're building this house on perfectly flat ground right at the beach. And at the beach you get a lot of ions, which are particles with an extra electron on them, making them either net negative or net positive. And you get a lot of negative ions in surf. And Jeff Reeves, I know him well, he asks his buddy worker, throw me that box cutting knife. So he throws him the knife, it lands right by his foot. He finishes hammering a nail, he looks back down, the box cutting knife is gone. He stops the entire construction of the house and literally like the Roswell event, he has his workers crisscross the entire property, they all line up in a row, and they search every inch of this flat landscape for the box cutting knife, and it's gone. Now, those are two stories. My disappearing light bulb and his box cutting knife, of very small objects disappearing. My pyramid is a power device with no more than 17 watts of power, and I got a light bulb to jump. The question is, what Anubis told me is the bigger pyramids that they built, if you switched them on, the number of electrons in an oscillator that big is so massive, and the wave compression that happens at the apex is so intense. At UC Berkeley, at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, Raymond Chow, this was in Discover magazine, he got particles of light to go faster than light speed by sending a crystal light beam through a sheet of silica. Now, quartz crystal is silica. And when it goes through the silica, it goes 3.7 times the speed of light in the early days, and he got it up to over 30 times the speed of light. So I said, what does silica look like under the microscope? What is its molecular geometry? Every element on the periodic table has a molecular geometry. Silica is a three-sided pyramid. I said, what's a three-sided pyramid going to do when you send an electromagnetic signal through it? It's going to compress at the tip. And therefore, that's exactly what the data showed in Raymond Chow's experiments, that the wave compressed and went faster than light. So, years later, Chinese-American scientist Li Jun Wang at Princeton University, at the super lab there, he sends a crystal light source through cesium chloride gas. It goes 300 times the speed of light.
Wow.
So I said, what's the geometry of cesium chloride? If you look up its geometry, it's 6 four-sided pyramids in a cube. Not a cube, 6 four-sided pyramids in a cube.
Wow.
And that experiment was really advanced because they ended up slamming different beams of light, I believe at different color wavelengths, through different sides of the cube, and it produced a 300 times the speed of light signal. So what does that tell you about pyramid geometries and pyramid oscillators in that shape? Is you get a signal at the base that gets higher and higher and higher square wave frequency. At the top, it compresses so intensely, and you generate a faster than light signal at that wave compression point. But if you can put a person in the king's chamber, which is where Anubis was with me in that vision, that dream, it was an actual lucid dream that night, and you turn the pyramid on and you have its power source, which I believe is the Ark of the Covenant now, which would just make a great Indiana Jones movie, and you switch it on, I saw a vortex. It was almost like a beam form of such high intense energy. It's like it burned a bright, luminous hole in the fabric of space-time in our dimension, and that's what opened up the hole that allowed us to all. It's like our electric. You look down at your body, and everything was spinning. It was like a spinning light.
Do you think that's what the what they call the sarcophagus in the King's Chamber held as the covenant, the Ark of the Covenant, and people in the room were then bathed in this beam?
The Ark of the Covenant doesn't quite fit inside of it, but it would rest perfectly on top of it.
Oh, so maybe you were underneath it because it was a hollow.
No, see, once you have the Ark of the Covenant in there and you switch it on, I've done experiments with granite. The granite in the pyramid is radioactive. And when I've ran my WAN transmitters from lightstreamtechnologies.com on a granite countertop, I get Kundalini goosebumps. Everybody in the room who was touching the granite countertop was like, it's already oscillating because it's radioactive granite.
Mm-hmm.
Not all granite's radioactive, but the red granite from Egypt is very radioactive.
Mm-hmm.
And Robert Temple has done measurements on the radiation in the pyramids, and it's high level. So it's already oscillating a little bit because of the ionizing radiation effect. So when you add power to that, it oscillates like crazy in the core of the King's Chamber because it's all granite.